Timothy, are you coming tomorrow, or will you only drop by next week? The foreman of the loader brigade handed some bills to the tall guy. Aksenov gratefully took the money from the brigade leader for his honestly worked shift. If I don't finish with the documents by evening, then don't wait, the foreman nodded understandingly to the young guy. Trying to catch a break wherever you can again. I respect the hard-working ones. I haven't met people like you for a long time. People usually come to us either out of great need or to earn money for drinks. The men shook hands and went their separate ways. Timothy was grateful to Ivan for always being ready to hire him. Workers for loading goods were always needed. Timothy turned 25. The guy celebrated his birthday modestly, buying a huge bag of his favorite sugar cookies at a cheap supermarket and distributing them to his neighbors in the basement where he had lived for the past 2 years. It turned out that Timothy had spent a large part of his life on the streets. He either wandered, lived around the region, or stayed for a while in some quiet town. People were calm and tolerant towards wanderers. This time the guy was lucky to be in a quiet and bustling town. He almost immediately met a group of homeless people like him. They were all exceptionally intelligent and good-natured people. Circumstances of their lives just hadn't unfolded in the best way, and that's how he ended up living with them in a large, spacious basement, where he managed to arrange quite decent living conditions for himself. However, Timothy was not one of those homeless people who drowned their despair in alcoholic drinks or engaged in thefts in stores and shops. The guy earned a living, albeit small but honest money. He achieved them exclusively by legal means, collecting bottles, various glass containers, packaging, processing at a paper recycling plant, or working as a loader at the station. In general, it was a standard survival kit for any homeless person who decided not to get involved in various criminal adventures, and Timothy was quite content with this option. He saw no point in joining any groups. The opportunity to earn a certain amount of money once carried too many risks. The young man didn't need them at all. On his way back from the station, Timothy habitually stopped by a small quiet park in the center of the town. Here, he usually collected bottles left by local residents after their daytime walks. Opening a large bag, Timothy began methodically inspecting the bins and peeking under neat benches in search of the coveted glass that could bring him some money in the morning. Few passers-by strolling through the park at this time paid no attention to Timothy. The young man had grown up in an orphanage where he was constantly surrounded by dozens of eyes. Moreover, many of the local residents already knew him well, so they reacted calmly to his presence in the park. In reality, Timothy disliked recalling his childhood in the orphanage. He was treated extremely poorly. Teachers often raised their hands against him and other children simply because adults never liked kids. They called such a method of upbringing realistic, although Timothy suspected that his caregivers were people who took pleasure in tormenting those weaker than them. He would occasionally run away from the orphanage to escape constant beatings and reproaches. During those times, he wandered the streets, imagining what his life could have been like if he had been lucky enough to be born into a normal, loving family. The final straw that made him permanently leave the orphanage before completing it was a shocking incident that occurred when he was a teenager. During one of his unauthorized walks, he saved a small, adorable, and affectionate puppy from the clutches of a horrible man. Some villain had stopped on a bridge and intended to throw the little one in a closed cardboard box right into the river. Timothy heard the cries coming from it and seriously asked the brute why he was doing such a thing. At that moment, the man intended to throw the box with the puppy. "Not your business. Get out of here, kid, while your limbs are still intact," the man rudely replied and turned away, leaving Timothy. Inside, everything tightened with pain and anger. It wasn't just some stranger standing before him. It was the director, Nikolai. The guy had long suspected that their director suffered from some mental disorders, but to act like this with a puppy in broad daylight was beyond belief. Timothy could not allow such a monstrous evil to happen before his eyes. "Nikolai, put the box on the ground. Don't do this. Don't destroy the puppy," he pleaded. Nikolai, with a disgusting smirk, replied, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here right now." The man momentarily got distracted to threaten, "What should I say for you to finally understand that running away from our shelter is not the best idea?" Before continuing, please subscribe to the channel. It's motivating to release new videos every day. This boss always covered the cruel actions of his subordinates. Many of the kids tried to report the teachers to the police, especially those who entered the shelter quite recently and at a relatively conscious age. However, who would listen to children, especially teenagers from an orphanage? Moreover, Timothy always believed that the local police officer had long been paid off by the shelter director, so he deliberately turned a blind eye to the mischief and cruelty taking place here. Timothy preferred not to think about what happened to those kids who tried to intervene. He only knew that such interference was severely punished within the walls of their shelter. All these memories and feelings merged into one huge fiery knot in Timothy's soul, which could only be gotten rid of in one way. "Put the box on the ground, please," once again, but more insistently, the teenager requested. "Oh, are you going to do something worse to me?" Nikolai Petrovich suddenly laughed, extending his hand with the box. "You fool, Aksanov, no matter how much you get beaten, you just can't grasp that pity and feelings in life are our main weaknesses," he shrugged. But Timothy wasn't listening anymore. He grabbed the box and ran. The teenager ran through the streets as fast as he could. There was no turning back. Timothy knew very well that if he returned to the shelter, they simply wouldn't let him live peacefully. He constantly ran away. And the police, they wouldn't investigate anything. They would close the case as an unfortunate accident. When he reached a safe place in the residential area of the city, Timothy finally stopped, taking deep breaths. With immense relief, he exhaled and sat down on an old bench. Carefully placing the box next to him, Timothy's fingers trembled as the puppy opened its eyes. The puppy's face resembled that of a fox and was a mix of a dachshund and another breed. However, the puppy was very thin. Seeing Timothy, the puppy whimpered again, attempting to poke its head out. "Come here, little one," Timothy said, pulling the dog out of the detested box. The poor dog. Timothy began to pet her slowly and immediately felt her wet nose burying into his jacket, continuing to whine. Don't cry, everything will be fine with us now," he tried to reassure her. "Timothy, you are so good, so kind. No one will ever hurt you again, I promise." The puppy just sadly looked into the boy's eyes. "Oh well," he said, leaning against him again. "I'll call you Lucky. Are you okay with that?" Timothy asked the puppy. "Seems like you've had a stroke of luck today." The puppy, hearing its new name, joyfully whined and quickly wagged its tail. It seemed to like it. "He likes it too," Timothy thought happily. "Lucky, we're going to start a completely new life now, and no one will dare to look at us badly, especially those scoundrels from the shelter. Enough is enough. I've had enough. If I can't stop them, then at least I'll finally get out of this hell." Lucky, as if understanding Timothy, softly growled in response. "Yes, dear, I'm glad you're on my side," the boy replied just as softly and slowly walked, holding the puppy in his arms. From that moment, Timothy and Lucky became inseparable. Timothy took care of his beloved all these years, trying to provide her with food and everything she needed. Together, they moved in their small travels around the country wherever he went. Lucky grew into a beautiful short-statured dog that strongly resembled a corgi, only her color was entirely chocolate. People on the street smiled, seeing Timothy leading his beloved dog on a leash, and some even asked for permission to pet her. Timothy never objected to this, and Lucky invariably received her share of affection and love from the city dwellers. Lucky passed away a year ago, and Timothy buried her in the forest belt outside the city. Then he couldn't come to terms with such a sad loss for a long time. This dog became his most loyal and devoted friend. She warmed him for so many years when they had to spend the night on the street, enduring all the hardships of homeless life. But she never ran away and never barked at her owner, considering him her favorite person on earth. Timothy still missed Lucky a lot, her joyful bark, and her ability to remain calm and kind in any circumstances. But the guy understood that the only thing he had no power over in this life was time. Timothy took the dog to veterinarians, but they said there was nothing to be done. The dog was already old. Timothy decided for himself that he would always remember Lucky. He believed that she was now in some good place and was definitely watching over her homeless owner from there. After finishing collecting glass bottles in the park, the young man headed back to his basement. There, his dormitory neighbors were already waiting for him, and this evening they decided to cook something similar to fish soup in a small cast-iron cauldron. A strange aroma of canned fish filled the air. The guy involuntarily wrinkled his nose at the unpleasant smell. However, he managed to put on a friendly smile. The neighbor was an engineer who had lost his job during the chaos of the 90s. "We're cooking fish here. The soup is almost ready. Join us." The neighbor politely invited him. "Thank you." Timothy thanked him and made a respectful nod towards his food. "I'm sure this soup will turn out to be amazing, but I've already eaten today. Maybe some other time, I understand. Don't you want to overeat at night?" The man winked at him. "You young people probably watch your figure. As for me, if there's an opportunity to eat, you should take advantage of it." The neighbor mumbled something good-naturedly to himself. Timothy managed to slip into his room at this time. There, he went through the bottles collected in the park once again, then neatly transferred the money he earned today into a special metal box. The young man planned to visit the local shopping center the next day to buy himself new sneakers. The ones he had been wearing for the past couple of years were practically falling apart. Timothy diligently set aside money from each paycheck for a new pair, which he had already spotted in the corresponding section of the store's regular sales. Having finished with everything he needed, Timothy settled comfortably in his chair and instantly fell asleep. The day had been tough, so he didn't have to worry about suffering from insomnia. Usually, after his shift at the station, Timothy would disconnect as soon as his head touched the pillow. This time, too, his sleep was sound and almost devoid of dreams, which Timothy was always glad about. He didn't dream, didn't fly to other worlds, didn't see a wonderful and interesting life in his dreams. Walking through the shops in the shopping center, Timothy enjoyed looking at expensive gadgets and beautiful things. The guy sighed sadly, looking at the latest model laptop and a trendy graphic tablet. "Oh, if only I had such equipment, I might have somehow improved my life by now. I would have engaged in design or drawing," Timothy thought sadly to himself. Since childhood, he noticed a tendency towards beauty in himself, but couldn't explain it. To some extent, he was even embarrassed to admit it to his few friends from the orphanage. But Timothy drew remarkably well, and he thought his parents must have been real artists, or, at the very least, people close to art. That's why he never judged his basement friends and other homeless people. Among them, there were always those who were simply forced to accept the difficult circumstances of their lives. But this didn't mean they enjoyed vagrancy and collecting bottles from trash bins. Finally deciding to go for shoes, Timothy walked through a long corridor with an arch leading to the adjacent wing of the complex. Along the way, the guy came across a large playground where children of different ages were having a great time. Watching how joyfully the kids laughed and how easily they jumped over inflatable balls of impressive size, Timothy couldn't help but smile. Oh, how much he would give to have the opportunity to play like that without fear, waiting for his beloved kind parents to come for him. Walking with them, enjoying delicious ice cream, Timothy wiped away tears from his face. He approached the ramp, adorned with bright lamps shimmering in different colors. It created the impression that under this ramp, as a rule, performances by animators take place. They arrange whole spectacles to entertain the kids while their parents wander through the stores. There were no adults nearby, and the children were left alone. Despite the safety rules, there should have been someone to monitor the working electrical device. The guy approached closer and immediately noticed that the bottom of the ramp was gradually starting to smoke. A little girl, about 6 or 7 years old, was playing next to a large teddy bear. She seemed completely oblivious to what was happening behind her. Timothy smelled a sharp burning wire odor and shouted to the girl, "You should move away from here. It's not safe." The girl looked at him with a puzzled expression, shrugged her shoulders, and continued playing as if nothing had happened. Timothy nervously looked around, trying to find someone on duty. "I'm not kidding. It's really dangerous. Look at the smoke." In that second, the ramp suddenly hissed wildly, like an angry snake. Light bulbs in it began to burst with a loud crackle, one after another. Without hesitation, the guy rushed towards the girl, grabbed her, and in the same moment, the huge burning structure collapsed where they had been standing. The girl in his arms burst into loud tears, but the young man only hugged her tighter. Timothy didn't feel any pain. It was as if he were in a vacuum through which distant cries broke through. Sparks showered over him. Timothy leaped forward, holding the little girl close. "Quickly, give her to me," a nearby high-pitched female voice said, and Timothy handed the child to her without hesitation. "Don't move. I've already called the firefighters and the ambulance," the same girl reassured him, after which, without warning, she sprayed Timothy's back with a handheld fire extinguisher. The guy fell into shock, and a second later lost consciousness. The last thing he managed to see was the pale, tear-stained face of the young girl. She had a large and beautiful bow on her head, and the guy noticed her black, beautiful eyes. Timothy was brought to the hospital, and he came to. Fortunately, Timothy didn't suffer serious burns, and the little girl was completely unharmed, the doctor assured him. "You acted like a true hero, so now your task is to rest and recover. The girl has already been handed over to her father, so any complaints will be directed solely to the management of the shopping center and its electricians. They apparently missed the malfunction, and that's what caused the short circuit." The investigator visited him several times in his hospital room to clarify what exactly happened that day at the shopping center. The middle-aged police officer questioned Timothy in detail about everything, after which he signed documents regarding his willingness to be a witness in the negligence case against the electricians. "Nothing serious. You only have a couple of scratches," the doctor said. "But I can see that life hasn't been kind to you. Where will you go after discharge?" Timothy looked at the surgeon with a kind smile. He was pleased that this person turned out to be so compassionate, understanding, and sincerely concerned about him. "I have a place," Timothy replied, "if my acquaintances haven't given it to anyone else. And if it's already taken, I'll look for another place to spend the night." The doctor felt sorry for Timothy. Such a good person, like you shouldn't live on the streets. Suddenly, the surgeon pulled a business card from his lab coat pocket and handed it to the guy. "If things get really bad, try going here. It's a new charity center they opened 2 months ago. They help the homeless, feed them, provide a place to spend the night and bathe. Perhaps there are available spots, and they can also help you with work. They occasionally have vacancies from social services and small private firms that collaborate with them and require laborers. Take it, please. It might come in handy." The young man was amazed that there are still compassionate people in the world. 2 weeks after being discharged, Timothy returned to his familiar basement. After numerous attempts to fall asleep, Timothy finally carefully took out from his jacket pocket the very business card that the surgeon gave him. "Okay, I'll go there tomorrow," Timothy thought. When he approached the new bright building, his heart beat faster in joyful anticipation of something good. A polite woman greeted him at the entrance and, after specifying the purpose of his visit, escorted him to the local employment assistance service. Unfortunately, there were no job openings. "Try coming back in early September," advised the social service employee. "I think we can find something suitable for you then." Timothy sighed but nodded understandingly, thanking the worker for her time. After that, the young man descended to the large cafeteria on the ground floor. Once there, Timothy immediately caught a wonderful smell and stood in line with another 20 hungry homeless individuals. "It smells delicious, of course." The girl smiled and scooped up a large portion of hot broth. "Take another serving of the second dish." The girl handed Timothy a plate, and at that moment, the young people locked eyes. In the same instant, the girl turned pale. Timothy looked at her and couldn't believe his eyes. "Is it you?" Timothy could barely speak. "Timothy," shouted the girl, hastily placing a plate on the tray, almost spilling its contents. To him, it didn't seem like just any girl, the one who left the children to fate on that fateful day in the shopping center. Timothy immediately recognized this girl. He had read sincere feelings of guilt and fear, circled the charitable foundation building, and saw her. The girl sat on a small bench near the black entrance, crying bitterly. "What's wrong with you?" Timothy asked as he approached. "Did you get so upset because of me?" "I didn't mean to scare you. I'm sorry." The poor girl slowly looked at Timothy. "Oh God, I feel so guilty in front of you." Tim extended his hand to her and kindly said, "Don't worry so much. I'm not mad at you. Thanks to you, we managed to save the girl from the fire in time. Thankfully, none of the other children were hurt. Do you work here every day now?" Timothy asked, meaning as a volunteer. "No, just twice a week," replied Rita. "I sell tickets at the cinema, and I come here because I love helping people." The girl shrugged shyly, and in that moment, Timothy suddenly felt the desire to see Rita again. Now that we've sorted everything out, would you allow me to come here during your shifts sometimes? Timothy asked hopefully. The girl looked at him attentively and then nodded. Come tomorrow evening to the cinema where I work. There will be an interesting movie. Timothy literally beamed with happiness. He was glad that he would get to see the girl he liked again. It will be nice for me too if I can somehow make up for my guilt in front of you, Timothy said, looking at her seriously. After that, the guy's life changed significantly, filled with meaning. Over time, they started dating. Rita didn't perceive his homelessness as something negative. She didn't care that Timothy lived in the basement. She felt only genuine sympathy and tenderness towards him, and although the young people hadn't said it out loud yet, they both understood that they felt genuine tender feelings for each other. The relationship between Tim and Rita developed in its own way, and there was an ideal and mutual understanding between them. They spent every free moment together, walking the city streets, sharing their dreams and plans for the future. Timothy felt that meetings with Rita gave his life new colors, filling it with meaning. One evening, as the sun was setting, they strolled along the river. Romance filled the air, and Timothy decided to tell Rita about his feelings. Rita, I want to tell you something important, he began, holding her hand. With you, I've found what I've always been looking for. You've given my life meaning, and I can't imagine it without you. Rita smiled and replied, Timothy, you've become very important to me too. We've experienced so many moments together, and I feel that my heart belongs to you. Thus, they confessed their love to each other, and their relationship became even stronger. Over time, Timothy decided to change his life for Rita. He started working on himself, aiming to create a better future for her. A few years later, Timothy and Rita were already a family. They overcame many difficulties together, supporting each other in the toughest moments. The love they shared became their foundation, and they created their cozy world filled with happiness and understanding. If you like the story, then like and subscribe to the channel. Also watch the following videos.